Hello and welcome to the BikeRadar podcast. As you can see, we're now on YouTube, so don't forget to like and subscribe to make sure you hear all our episodes. Also, if you want to hear it just through your ears, don't forget we're on iTunes, Spotify and all the usual podcast places, so get those subscriptions coming in. Today we're going to talk about road tubeless. We've got Jack Luke and Matthew Allen from the BikeRadar team who are going to talk us through what the whole point and what is road tubeless. So, who's going to start?
I'll start. Road tubeless. Obviously, tubeless tyres are very, very well established in mountain biking. No inner tube, you put sealant in the tyre, punctures self-heal, you can run super low pressures. People have been doing that in mountain bikes for years. They've been doing it in gravel and cyclocross bikes for years, and they've kind of been doing it in road for years as well, but it's never quite caught on. It's never hit that critical mass because the case for road tubeless is a little bit harder to make, because on the mountain bike side you've got very strong arguments for low pressure and stuff. You need that.
Low pressure, punctures, ride feel, traction, all that stuff.
Whereas on the road, a lot of people are very happy with their tubed setup, so there would have to be a little bit more. We're going to talk a bit about that.
And that little bit more is largely being driven by the pro peloton, and road tubeless has been proven to have some serious performance benefits, and that's been kind of the focus of your work recently, Matthew, hasn't it?
Yeah, I've been working on a feature for BikeRadar about this. There is a growing body of data suggesting that road tubeless tyres are simply faster than conventional tyres, faster both than tubulars, which is what the pro peloton currently ride almost exclusively, and also faster than conventional clinchers, which have an inner tube.
As a slight outsider to the world of super road tech, it does seem that when it comes to picking what you put in your tyres on the road is quite confusing. You've got tubular, which is a tube of tyre. You've got inner tubes like the black butyl, like normal ones that I would have used 10 years ago on a mountain bike, back when we didn't really bother with tubeless. Latex, and now tubeless. They all seem different. They all seem to have different advantages and disadvantages. But why is tubeless going to be the big thing?
Well, it depends if you believe it is, of course, but manufacturers of tyres are very keen now to tell us that tubeless tyres are faster in terms of rolling resistance, and that's a big thing because it's a real gain that can still be made. Tubular technology, that's a tyre that's glued onto a rim, which is what all the pros use, it's sort of peaked. It's very well established, and there are good reasons why pros use them, because they ride really well. You can ride one that's flat, so if you puncture in a race, you can ride a bit on a flat tyre, and they don't have to worry about fixing punctures during a race, because obviously they've got a guy to bring them either a new bike or a new wheel. But tubeless does have potential advantages anyway if you can reduce the total number of flats, because tubeless is usually designed to work with a sealant, so flats self-heal, and if you can lower rolling resistance, you can go faster. And if those two things make a strong enough case, then we could see tubeless take over in professional racing. And some people think that's going to happen. Some people think it's going to happen quite soon. Others think it's a long way off. But we've had several new tyres launched recently. There was a new Specialized Turbo Air tubeless, and they claimed it was both faster and had better grip than a comparable tubular. So something is happening at this moment, but it's kind of a transition phase.
It does seem that for road tech to take off, it has to happen in the pro peloton. But it sounds like, I mean, from the mountain bike side, the advantage of tubeless isn't just for the pros, it's for everyone, because you get less punctures, because you can run lower pressures and therefore have more grip. So why has it got to be the pros who get it, sort of make it grow, rather than the punters?
Well, I would argue that the advantages of road tubeless are probably larger for the punters of this world, because as Matthew mentioned, when it comes to tubulars and pros racing, they have a nice man in a car who's going to bring them a fresh wheel should they so happen to puncture, whereas we don't have that luxury, though of course we do, the media bourgeoisie with BikeRadar.
I do all my testing with the team car behind.
But, for punters, they're more likely to just feel those benefits in terms of increased speed and get somewhere closer towards the improvements in performance you get with tubulars compared to just regular clinchers. But what's interesting as well is that, if you're a team working with say they want you to use a tubeless tyre setup, the likelihood is that they're going to choose something which is compatible with each other. So some tubeless setups work better with others, and road tubeless has been a bit of a minefield up to this point. But we're seeing hopefully a little bit of a shift in that the ET RTO which is the European organisation which kind of defines tyre standards, or the ISO, are about to bring around these new standards for road tubeless tech. So from a consumer side, we haven't had this standard up till now. We'll talk a bit more about that in a second, but we are beginning to see that now. So I think it is perhaps a little bit of a case of, yes, now the pros are adopting it. We're going to see punters adopt it because we like to copy the pros. But I also think this standard is maybe the other thing that's been holding it back, perhaps.
Do you think having this standard will make life in general a little bit easier? One of the things I've always found, with road bikes and road bike tyres, is that it can be an absolute, even with like running a regular tube set up on a standard rim, it's a nightmare to get the tyres on sometimes if you're not like totally adept. With the mountain bikes, again, there is the UST standard, which came out, well, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, and that was Mavic's thing, where they had this standardised thing, and it's kind of taken off, but it's kind of run alongside more like, I guess, ghetto tubeless ideas. Will having this ERTO standard make life easier for tubelessness?
Predictable.
Yeah, it will. There's a bit of confusion about standards, actually, because as I understand it, there's an ETRTO standard, which seems to have been established, I think. There's also an ISO, so that's international working group, that's coming up with a standard. I'm not sure if that's going to be exactly the same. One way or the other, though, in the next 6 months, we expect there to be a general bike industry agreement. There'll probably still be some dissenters. But what that hopefully will mean is that when you buy a road tubeless tyre, first of all, it'll be the size it says it is. Mm-hmm. So when you get a 25mm tyre, it will be 25mm wide. And also, if it says tubeless on it, it'll work with any standard conforming rim which says tubeless on it. Because at the moment, we've got this problem where a lot of stuff is sold as tubeless ready, mm-hmm. and it can be run tubeless, but then there's a question of like, what rim tape do you need and stuff, because that affects how a tyre fits. And sometimes stuff just doesn't work together. You'll get a setup where it's too loose, which is really dangerous because then a tyre can blow off the rim, or it's too tight and you can't get the tyres on and off. And that's why a lot of people have this thing with tubeless where they're not going to make that leap because there's too much uncertainty. And when it does go wrong, tubeless is deeply frustrating. I'm sure we've all had experiences where we've covered a room in sealant.
Yes, had the future of road tyre tech literally all over my entire kitchen. So.
Yeah, it's really annoying when that happens. Actually, you've been working on something about sealant, haven't you, Jack?
Yes, I've been working on something in tandem with kind of Matthew's piece. I had an absolute disaster, a true disaster, a road tubeless disaster out on a ride. And under the watchful eye of a friend who works for the Environment Agency in kind of watercourse pollution, watched as my tyre failed to seal, and I left about 500ml, it felt like, of sealant all over the pavement. And he asked, is this okay? Is that fine for that to happen?
And you're going to try and answer that question.
And I'm trying to answer that question. I've reached out to a bunch of different tubeless sealant manufacturers, and they've given me a number of incredibly long-winded answers about the environmental impacts of their tubeless sealant. And the answers have been a pretty mixed bag, to be honest. It's interesting in that a lot of them are quite honest, and they say, well, our natural latex will degrade well in the environment, and the particles we use, they're based on natural materials like silica crystals or something like this. But then others, who I won't name just yet, you can wait for that article on BikeRadar, have been a little bit more aloof and kind of saying, oh yeah, it's made of quite dodgy synthetic chemicals and it's full of microplastics. Please don't put it in the river. So I think it's going to be a very mixed bag, but it's something that people haven't really thought about. I certainly hadn't. I remember years ago, glitter was one of the things people recommended.
It's still going in some tubeless sealants now.
Yeah, glitter, it's a microplastic. People know it's terrible now. It basically never degrades. I'd done exactly the same thing in the past, in less woke times. But we've moved on. But it's interesting to see that, some have an awareness of its impact. But one thing I didn't really anticipate was all the people telling me it's more environmentally friendly than inner tubes because you use less rubber.
Yeah.
Which is kind of
perhaps not totally unfair at that point.
You have to line a tubeless tyre with more rubber.
Also, we patch our tubes because, we're not made of money.
Exactly. So anyway, I think that's going to be an interesting read and kind of adds a new element to this discussion, and perhaps it'll just raise a bit of awareness around how we should or shouldn't be disposing of tubeless sealant.
So if we take the view that I'm a massive roadie punter, which is painfully true if you ever see them on a road bike. Very briefly, what are the advantages? Because we have talked very quick, like, puncture this and rolling resistance that, but am I going to really notice the benefits? And also, what am I going to have to... I can get a tyre. If I've got a tubeless tyre, this new Schwalbe or whatever it is, what else am I going to need to do?
To set up a tubeless tyre?
Can I? Back in the day, I'd get an old inner tube, stretch it around the rim, split it down the middle. Can I do that?
Don't do that.
Disaster.
Don't do that.
I was 15 at the time.
I think for mountain bikes this is fine, but when you're working with road bikes, you're working under such higher pressures in the tyres. That's a disaster waiting to happen. And I think that goes back to the point around the standard where, there's perhaps been a bit of toing and froing, a little bit of DIY, and that's created a bad perception of road tubeless tech. And to answer your first question, yes, I think you can feel a difference, certainly. If you're running wider tyres, which are faster, there's no denying now, wider tyres are faster, up to a point, you do get that kind of improved feel by being able to run lower pressures, as well as the decrease in rolling resistance, which is more marginal, but for racers, sure, it definitely helps. And then in terms of weight, I think you get a reduction in comparison to most clincher setups.
Usually, although there's not a huge amount in it, because obviously you do have the weight of sealant, and tubeless tyres usually are slightly heavier than their standard clincher counterparts, and then obviously the rim has to be suitable, which can make it heavier. So it's a bit of a grey area on the weight front. But also, you asked, what do you need? You need a tubeless compatible rim, you need a tubeless tyre, you need valves, you need sealant, and if everything works well, you can just pump it up and it will work, but you may also need some sort of tubeless inflator, whether that's like a canister or a specific pump or something.
So it's not necessarily a real plug-and-play thing. You are going to have to invest in this.
Well,
you have to
post-standard, hopefully it will be. But at the moment, I would say no, that it is not a plug-and-play thing. Unless if you stay very much within a brand's ecosystem at the moment, say you use zip rims and zip tyres, or Stands rims and a tyre they recommend, things are probably going to work. But when you start mixing and matching at the moment, it's anyone's guess.
So who's got tubeless tyres out at the moment? Obviously, the biggest one that we've just recently talked about was the new Schwalbe one.
Yeah, new Schwalbe Pro 1.
That came out a week or two ago.
Yeah.
Stuff on site.
Specialized came out with their Turbo Air recently, and there's quite a number of others like Hutchinson and people who've been making them one way or another for years. Weirdly, the road tubeless thing goes back a lot further than we realise. I found this when I was researching the feature I'm writing. Michelin launched 3 road tubeless tyres for professionals only in 2008.
Really?
But obviously the experiment did not succeed because they vanished without a trace and you could never buy them. But one way or another, people have been doing road tubeless for a long time.
I think as a bit of a kind of show as well in the industry's faith for tubeless tech is Continental also. At the start of this year, they redesigned what was their kind of headline tyre. The GP was the 4000, now the 5000 is their latest tyre, and brought lots and lots of new fancy technology in clincher form, but also critically it also came out in a tubeless variant.
And they've never done a road tubeless tyre. They've never even done, I think you said, a tubeless cross tyre, have they? No. So that for Continental to jump on board there is very significant because it's a huge manufacturer with a lot of clout.
So yeah, I think it's coming. Road tubeless is coming from a consumer perspective, but also one of the things you found when we were researching, and I think our frenemies at Cycling Tips had done an article along those lines, essentially saying that investment from the industry and into new wheels is pretty much entirely behind tubeless tech. Nobody is spending money on tubular development now because it's old tech, pretty much.
It's pretty settled for the most part. It's not that tubular rims are probably still going to come out, but it's kind of, they're not innovating in the tubular department.
In the world of mountain biking, tyres are probably the unsung heroes a lot of the time in terms of control, feel, performance of the bike. The difference between a cheap tyre and an expensive tyre, whether it's run tubed or tubeless, makes a huge difference to the feel of the bike. On road bikes, I'm guessing that's similar. A cheap road tyre is going to feel sketchy compared to a real top-end good one. Is tyre tech the next big thing in road bike development? We've seen aerodynamics, we've seen wireless shifting, all this sort of jazz. Is the tyre a slightly unsung, sort of under the radar upgrade that one could or should make?
Arguably. I mean, the very best road tyres now in the market, one could argue, are kind of your cotton casing, super high-end open tubulars or tubeless tyres. But when you think about it, it does have a lot of advantages, but it is also quite an old school material, which isn't to say it's necessarily bad. But if you look at things like, was it Vittoria with their graphene?
Yeah, so there's innovation happening in material. I think it's interesting with road bike tyres, because I know in mountain bikes it's very normal to talk about like how hard your compound is, for example, and whether it's appropriate for the season. Whereas in the world of high-end road bikes, people quite often ride the same tyre all year round, or they might have like a super puncture-proof one for the winter, but they're not thinking about a different compound for a different temperature, which, given that rubber is very seriously affected by temperature, is kind of surprising. So there's definitely scope for more optimization there. Whether or not most people will care enough is another matter, because I think the biggest impediment to road tubeless happening on a kind of global takeover scale is that normal clinchers are good enough for most people, and they're very easy to live with, normal clinchers, because like you can hang up your bike with normal clinchers for 6 months, take it off the wall, pump the tyre up, go ride, it's fine. If you do that with a tubeless tyre, all the sealant will have dried out, the tyre will be flat, you might need to reseat it even. There is more ongoing maintenance for road tubeless, so it has to justify itself in other ways for it to be worthwhile for most people.
I'd say yesterday, in fact, I was at home and it was the bank holiday weekend, and I took my gravel bike back to the flatlands of York, where there's literally no interest in mountain biking. I was like, I'll go for a ride. I'd kind of forgotten that on the previous ride, that particular bike had got a little puncture, and it took us a little while to seal it. And I pumped up my tyres. I was like, well, I'm gonna put like 45 in there just to, some tarmac miles. And obviously, like, it was punctured, and because I hadn't put any sealant in the tyre for so long, because I don't ride that bike super often, couldn't get the seal. I was in a steaming mood for about an hour and a half, because I was like, I'm going to go for a bike ride. I've got to change and everything. I couldn't go for a bike ride, and because I'm running tubeless.
Yeah.
So you do have to keep on top of it, and with mountain bikes it's the same.
And I think that's why, for example, at the low end of the market, it's never going to take over, because for like cheap bikes, for people who don't care about bikes, who just use bikes to get from A to B, it's still overall going to be more work. I think. So I just can't see it happening. But for performance-minded cyclists, yeah, probably.
Maybe that low end someone needs to develop a good solid tyre.
No such thing.
No such thing.
Yeah.
No.
I think on your point about kind of improvements in road tyre tech, I don't think there's maybe at the top end there's little marginal gains that could be made there, but I think it's more as it trickles down towards the lower end, we'll see improvements in ride quality. So like a Continental Gator Skin, for example, by all accounts, yes, they're very puncture-proof tyres, but they're not that good to ride, really. Quite stiff sidewalls, more of a plasticky hard compound. Perhaps we'll see in time with new materials, we'll see them improve, and perhaps we'll see tubeless at that kind of level kick off. But yeah, I think that's somewhere you could see it improved. And I would say as a more general point, with most stock bikes that come often, as well as, say, finishing kit to kind of suit you, upgrading tyres on cheaper bikes, just like on mountain bikes, is a huge difference to the ride quality. At the end of the day, it's the only two things that are touching the road, and you can really improve ride quality, feel, control with better tyres.
That's why we like it when bike makers sell a bike with really good tyres, because
Yeah.
otherwise going and upgrading them, that's another, it can be, depending, especially if they were tubeless, actually.
Should we get a little bit geeky for a second then? What is IRTO? What are these standards? What does it mean? What are we talking about?
ETRTO is the European Rim Tyre Organisation, and ISO is the international standard. European Rim Tyre Organisation. So you would often see sizes written on a tyre. It would say like ETRTO 622-19.
And having this standard in place will make that cross-compatibility between different rims, different tyres, all this sort of stuff.
Hopefully, yeah.
A lot easier.
We don't know.
We'll find out.
It could all just be a total disaster.
And if we'll write about it if it is.
Yeah.
It's worth pointing out as well that body is made up of industry bodies. So it's
it doesn't just.
It's not the EU telling us it's.
Oh,
Tom, can it about the EU stuff. You won.
Get over it, all right? That's it. No one's a winner.
It's made up of kind of people like Continental, Pirelli, Schwalbe on it. That's basically.
I'm not going to listen because we'll miss people out, but all the major stakeholders are involved.
which means that it's actually the people that are making the tyres defining these standards. So it's very much in their interest to fulfill
They
that.
don't. The big problem from a tyre maker's point of view is if you've got people fitting tyres to rims and they're not compatible in the way that they should be, there's a massive liability issue because you can kill people.
Yeah.
And so they want this to happen. Whether or not they can agree exactly how to do it is another matter, but good things should be happening.
Wicked. I think we've probably bored everyone enough with tyre chat, haven't we?
Don't know about that. I'm enthralled.
We can crack on forever about this. Should we do a little plug for the cycle show, which is coming up in September?
Yes, we ought to.
Because we're contractually obliged.
Yeah.
And I'm now going to get my phone out just to get the details. It should be pretty cool, though. And it's the 12th to the 15th of September, although only the 12th if you're in the trade. It's at the NEC in Birmingham. You can get a 10% discount on your £15.50 entry fee if you use quick maths, $13.95. If you use the codes C+1 or MBUK1, there's a link in the BikeRadar article about this podcast to where you can buy the tickets. There's loads of places you can try out road and mountain bikes, e-bikes. There'll be some good chat as well on various stages, and some of the BikeRadar editorial team will be there to share their.
Tom Marvin will be
they can see the air quotes because there's a camera.
The Tom Marvin kissing booth has already sold out as well for this year.
Yeah, sadly, actually, I'm going to be on holiday, so
Very
gutted
convenient.
to miss that. Right, so we've been out riding bikes because that's what we get to do every now and again. What have you been doing recently, Jack? Tell us what adventures you've been having.
I had a very good adventure, actually. Yes, I did. I went for a very pleasant 2-day, 200-mile little jolly around South Wales.
A little 200 mile.
Well, it wasn't in one day. It wasn't in one go. I did a lovely ride from our hometown here in Bristol out to Swansea and then off further towards Carmarthen, out on my lovely All-City Mr. Pink, which is my long-term test bike. You can see a link for all my ride reports on that in the description for this. And it was excellent fun. And I didn't do it on tubeless tyres.
Whoa.
And you survived.
And I survived. Actually,
Did you puncture?
I didn't puncture. I had a latex tube in the rear and a regular butyl tube in the front.
And I mean, the difference in feel must have been stark.
It was incredible. The rear wheel just wanted to roll faster than the front. It was incredible.
Yeah. Fishtailing everywhere.
Yeah, out of control. And then, I headed back on the Sunday. And I just had a lovely little time. And then otherwise, for BikeRadar.com, we're in the midst of launch season. So there's been lots of cool new road bikes I've headed up on this week. And I've been kind of manning the good ship, making sure all that gets in front of your eyes.
What have we been learning about? What's come out?
Schwalbe was the new Pro 1 was definitely one of the highlights
Pro
for
1
last
tyre.
week. The Pro 1 tyre. Believe it or not, that's not me segueing. It was genuinely one of the highlights. Other than that,
Should we talk about ceramic speed?
oh yeah, yes, we also today we had a new ceramic speed concept bike drop from Specialized, and that's a chainless drivetrain. It was actually Matthew, you wrote about
so
that.
they actually announced this last year, so it's not.
Oh, the one that was at Eurobike with the funny.
That's right, yeah. So not new in that sense, but they Ceramic Speed have been working with Specialized. They've fitted out an S-Works Venge test bike, put it in the wind tunnel, which is what they call the wind tunnel.
Right.
Just be clear. And they have claimed that it's called Driven, the drivetrain, is the most aerodynamic drivetrain in existence, and that the Venge fitted with it is the most aerodynamic road bike that Specialized has ever tested.
Okay.
It is
in their
really
own wind tunnel.
In their own wind tunnel. It is actually really interesting because if you think about it, the way we change gears, broadly speaking, hasn't really changed much in the last 50, 70 years. It's been a derailleur that pushes a chain across some cogs, however many cogs there happen to be, and however that works. The Ceramic Speed system is totally different. It's a shaft drive, but not in the way that you might have thought with bevel gears. It uses little bearings and cutouts and a flat cassette thing. It's really, really cool. It's mental. I don't know if it will ever work in the real world, but I'm really glad that people are innovating with stuff like this.
And there's something about that on the site now.
There is indeed.
So what? Just Google BikeRadar Ceramic Speed Specialized.
I mean, one would hope they're just heading to BikeRadar every day.
Yeah. They've probably read this article 5 times over by the time this podcast comes out.
Okay. Matthew, have you been doing anything of
I've been
note?
riding my very lovely long-term bike, which is an aluminium Trek Imonda ALR.
You're a man of the people, an aluminium bike. You could have had anything.
With a wireless grip set.
I've got 105 and a steel bike. I am a man of the people and a carry saddlebag.
You see, it's
There
not
you go.
it's not all glamour here at
No.
BikeRadar.
I've had a lovely time on that bike, and it's been feeding into something which I'm working on, which is discussing the idea of how your kind of perception, your feeling about a bike affects like your experience of that bike.
Mhm.
Because I think riding around on what is an £800 frame, but it's a very light, lovely bike, there's a certain smugness associated with that when I could also be riding on like a £3,000 carbon frame. And I think our attitudes to bikes for different reasons are really interesting, whether that's because of where they're built or their brand or some other more emotional thing, like why do people ride steel bikes, Jack? I mean, because, you know, on
'Cause you
paper...
can weld it in the middle of Mongolia.
Yeah, which Jack does all the time.
All the time.
But on paper, like a steel bike doesn't make sense because it's
Yeah.
heavy and, you know, you could make it out of carbon or aluminium, which
Looks
would be
good on
lighter and
Instagram.
stuff. But it looks really cool on Instagram and it makes you feel nice. So
Yeah.
you ride it. And I think people don't buy bikes because of just a spec sheet. They buy it because of how it makes them feel.
Maybe
Something I think about a lot.
maybe frame material is something we can discuss in a future pod.
Steel is real. Aluminium cracks.
Yeah.
Carbon. What does carbon rhyme with?
It's just untrustworthy.
Titanium is forever.
Oh yeah, titanium is forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Magic carpet ride.
That's it. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good.
Done it. That's
Speaking of Gucci stuff, because you guys have been keeping it real with
what, like
steel and aluminium.
perineums?
Oh god, I've been riding some carbon mountain bikes recently, which has been very nice.
Oh, look at us, the trifecta of materials.
Yeah, I've so my long term Santa Cruz Chameleon, pretty cool now. Single speeded it, plus at the back, 29
That's
at
a
the front.
hardtail, isn't it?
That's a hardtail, and I'm very fashionable because I'm running as a mullet bike, and I've been having absolute hoot on that because it is really funny. Also beautiful, I think. It's probably one of the most attractive bikes I've ever ridden.
It's a lovely shade of poo brown if
It's
you
a
haven't
lovely
seen
shade of poo
if you
brown and
haven't seen it.
turquoise logos. It's pretty special, but
It's quite good value too, I hear.
it's not the best value for money bike in the world. But to be fair to Santa Cruz, in response to some of the comments on the video that we did about the bike, they did drop the price by about £400. So it's still very, very expensive. It is also very, very fun though. So
Sure, it's lovely.
speaking of other great value bikes, I've been riding another Santa Cruz, the new Tall Boy, which came out a couple of weeks ago now, and now they've moved their VPP linkage from the top mount to the bottom, the lower link VPP, which is a more descent focus, despite still having 120mm of travel at the back and 130 at front. So Tall Boy was their kind of trail XC bike and is now very much their short travel rowdy trail bike, which very much suits me down to the ground, and it is very good fun. I've only ridden it a couple of times, so I'm going to hold judgment so far. And in other trail bike news, I also rode the new Intense primers. So they have got rid of their entire trail bike range and replaced it with the primer, but they've gone 29 as one option, then they've got a 27.5 version as well, and they've bought out, they're probably one of the only people I know of with a production trail mullet bike on sale. So 29 at the front, 650 at the back. That's the one I've been riding the most. It's pretty cool. My thoughts will be on site fairly soon on both of those bikes because they're both really interesting new trail bikes. So that's what I've been doing.
Looking forward to that.
Let it be heard, Tom Marvin, man of the people,
Man
only
of the
rides
people.
boutique Californian mountain
Minimum
bikes.
5k, plastic only, preferably XTR or XX1. That's how I roll. Or one gear, single speed. There we go. So yeah, I think... one thing I actually wanted to ask was if you are watching this on YouTube, let us know what you've been doing the past couple of weeks on your bike. Got any cool photos or stories, anything like that? Let us know. And if you're listening to it on Spotify, iTunes, wherever, head over to BikeRadar and drop some comments in there because genuinely really interested into what people are doing and what you're interested in. And you know, if you've got any ideas of what you want us to talk about in the future, let us know because we're very open to your ideas, a bit of feedback.
Let us know why we're all wrong about road tubeless and why we're just listening to big bike and trying to push that down your throat.
So there we have it. Thank you very much for listening and watching this episode of the BikeRadar podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe on various pod providers and on YouTube, of course. And thanks so much, Jack and Matthew.